Anyway, what's going on, Brett? How can we help?
Yeah, so I was watching the Democratic town halls a little bit last night. And, Beto O'Rourke made a very scalding hot take comment about taxing churches based on their positions on same-sex marriage. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that. I have some pretty strong opinions there that might surprise some other atheists.
Interesting. So could you explain specifically a little more about what he said?
Yeah, so I don't quite remember the question that he was asked, but the sort of like the soundbite clip was Beto O'Rourke saying that he would propose removing the tax-exempt status of churches or religious institutions that preach against same-sex marriage. The whole theme of the town halls was like it's the equality in America town halls. So he was asked a question, and that was his position. And I'm of the opinion that clearly violates the Constitution. Be specifically tying tax exempt status to religious beliefs. I mean, that's clearly the government, putting its thumb on the scale in favor of certain religious beliefs.
Sure.
I understand the sort of thought process in his mind, but I think this is probably the worst position you could possibly take on this issue. Because the Republicans have been fundraising on this for 15 years.
What an interesting topic.
That was my opinion. I was wondering what you guys thought.
So first and foremost, I want to give a brief disclaimer. This show is produced by the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a nonprofit. So one of the things that we all agree on when we do hosting here is we cannot endorse any specific candidates. So we won't be talking about, I don't want to talk about Beto or any other kind of specific candidates in their capacity to serve or whatever. We just want to talk about the idea itself here, which is, like whether or not the government should, make some sort of a rule against churches not being able to marry gay people. I would have to agree with you, Brett. It seems like it's a violation there. As much as I think it's wrong, and I don't want them to do that. Unfortunately, we have state options for people to get married, regardless of their sexual orientation. It's different from like people not having access to like public schools, for example, for their race, right? Because that's denying someone a service that they couldn't otherwise have in their area. And churches, I don't know. When I think of churches, at least around here, in Texas, especially where I'm from, you couldn't throw a rock without hitting a church over in Waco. But it seems like if people already have the option to get married by some sort of secular means, and that's available to them enough to where they could do that, it doesn't make sense to me to kind of remove tax exempt status for that specific clause. But I don't know. Maybe Matthew, do you agree with that, or maybe you have a different take?
I'm kind of firmly in the opinion that if you talk politics as far if you're a 501c3 tax exempt organization and you say gays can't get married, you're espousing a political opinion and you shouldn't be doing that at all.
Okay.
If you want to talk about your religion, fine. But if you want to talk about, if you want to say, hey, I don't like gays and I think gays should be stoned, that's in the Bible. That's okay. If you don't want to marry gays in your church, that's okay. You can make that a policy. But if you espouse that opinion in saying that we will support political figures who support this, then you're making a political statement. That's where you run into action. And so I think it can be actionable. And so if you endorse a politician as a church, you are running against the 501c3, which is the tax exempt status organization.
Okay. Wow. That's
I'm on board with you on that, specifically that if you're going to be preaching politics from the pulpit, you should not be you should have your tax exempt status revoked. But that's an issue of political meddling in general. I'm talking about for this specific issue, some candidate X walked up on stage and specifically singled out this issue of a church not wanting to have a gay marriage in their church and saying that specific issue should get you lose your Texas status. And that clearly violates, the Lemon test. I mean, that's completely unconstitutional.
I agree with you, Brett.
I think if his position was to say, hey, I don't think any church, liberal or conservative, should be preaching politics, then, okay, that's reasonable. But I think given the setting and everything, I think that his position, at least if that's his position, he didn't make it, the candidate didn't make it clear. And, well, it's a nice soundbite for, religious people to say, oh, those dang liberals just want to take God and make God go away and punish us darn Christians. It's just like more harm than good that it's doing, in my opinion. I mean, people can disagree. I do think we need to be having a conversation about,
exactly,
churches be equal to other 501c3s in terms of opening their books and politics. They shouldn't be in their own category, but that's not the conversation that was being had. So at least in my opinion, I think the comment did more harm than good, but obviously that's a personal take of one atheist here. We're not all mono.
Yeah. I think that it's a discussion that we definitely should be having, and we should debate about that to find out what the general consensus is. But yeah, if a church just says we don't like gays and we won't marry them, that they can describe that as part of their religious belief. How much I despise it or not.
Yeah,
I think of it as the same way. Like I'm a former Catholic, so for me, I'm thinking of it as somebody in the government saying, you can't eat crackers in your religious ceremony. Because, obviously the Catholic thing is you receive the hosts and communion and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
That's clearly targeting a theological issue where there's no real secular purpose for the law.
To push back on that
argument that,
push back on that, Brett, because I do think there are certain practices that we do say that or we would want not to happen. For example, female genital mutilation. Stuff like
male genital mutilation
or male genital mutilation. I mean, I think of female specifically because sacrifices and stuff like
one.
Those are definitely religious practices that we definitely, I think, as a secular government should want to have laws against. So it does kind of cross the line there. But I think the difference between that and what we're talking about here is, we can demonstrate that that's causing harm. The vaccination stuff's another one where it's people won't vaccinate for religious reasons and stuff. Blood transfusions, we can demonstrate where that is causing a harm because you're denying someone a right. Whereas with the gay marriage stuff, it seems like there's still that public option out there. It seems like that there's, you may not be able to get married in this church, but there is another. And as it's different for businesses. I do think businesses should not be able to discriminate against people when doing services with each other. But I'm not sure the church counts as a public business. It's not providing a public service necessarily. Churches are providing for Christians. They're not providing for Muslims the same way or Jewish people the same way.
They're exclusive in nature.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're not like a public business. It's a guy baking a cake, master cake.
Exactly. Correct.
If you're advertising online, you have a public storefront.
Yes.
I'm not some libertarian atheist here.
Correct.
I think that guy should have to serve whoever walks in the door.
And that's my opinion too. As far as the Hobby Lobby stuff, the Chick-fil-A stuff, the cake, the master cake shops, if you're providing a public service for people, that's how businesses are kind of defined in this.
If you want to have your own, if you want to just bake cakes for friends out of your basement, and and you don't tell anybody about it other than your friends, and it's through word of mouth, sure, you should.
But who cares?
You can't be a guy with a public storefront advertising, "Hey, come in here and I'll bake a cake," and then somebody walks in and you say no. That's obviously a problem.
Now this is one because I remember reading a story. This was a year or two ago, Brett. Maybe you know about this. There was a Catholic woman who was a teacher at a Catholic school, who was fired as a teacher because she had posted Facebook photos of her gay wedding. And
I remember that.
that one gave me pause because it's like, well, it is
I
a
actually
Catholic.
don't remember that one.
I don't remember the names obviously, but this happened a few years ago, and that gave me pause only in the sense of, well, we are taking away somebody's livelihood here, like as a teacher and stuff, and like I don't see how them being a teacher and them being gay are like related at all. Like I don't know how one is going to be influencing the other. So that's definitely like, I mean, obviously they're discriminating against them because they're gay. But it's not a public school, and it's not like
Yeah,
so
at that
gets
point, it's a little different,
Yeah.
There
So-
was another Catholic school.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. There was another Catholic school here recently that fired a teacher for having a child out of wedlock. It's like,
yeah.
what I heard about 6-8 months ago, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Same point.
Baylor University, I remember there was a similar thing. Girl had a baby out of wedlock. It was they were threatening to take away her ability to be a student at the school. So yeah, those are ones where it's a little more hazy. I don't obviously I don't want those things to happen. I don't want people to be fired from their jobs, especially if it's on the grounds of something like their sexual orientation, which shouldn't have anything to really do with them teaching kids. Like it's not like they're going to be in relationships with kids or anything, or they're going to be teaching about, I don't know, at a Catholic school too. But yeah, it's
that's different because it's all about the framing. Because if you if you think about it from like a religious point of view, if you assume that these Catholic schools are essentially extensions of the church, which is probably what Catholics would say.
Yes.
Then it makes sense. And it's like, I think you should be, the people in the religion should be allowed to, fire or hire leaders who actually are part of the religion.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think if you're, let's take like a clergy project thing. If they find out that you're in the clergy project and you don't believe anymore, like, I kind of think that the church should be able to remove you because, well, it's part of the religion. You got to be part of the religion to lead the religion.
Yeah.
I understand that argument. So it depends. I guess it depends on what you consider the schools. If they're just like an extension of the church, then I kind of think that they're allowed to sort of pick and choose as long as this stuff was made clear ahead of time. Yeah, which sucks to say because I don't really want people to be losing their jobs for things that are clearly not a problem in the 21st century. But I don't know. It all depends on the framing and the legal arguments.
Yeah. For sure. Well, Brett, definitely super interesting discussion. I'm glad because I don't know if we've really talked about that particular topic, at least the original topic on this show before. So yeah, I love new stuff talking on here and hear people's opinions. And you have a great one. I think, it's obviously well thought out. And please, we should definitely talk about this one more. Anybody else who wants to call in to talk about this kind of stuff, the more legal talk about religion and how we handle it in our society is interesting. And we don't do it enough on here. So Brett, thanks again for calling. And
thanks, Brett.
Look forward to hearing from you again.
Guys.
Take care.
See ya.
Yeah, for sure. It sucks to say that, that a church should have the right to do that, to discriminate against who they want to marry in their church. But ultimately, when it comes to like a legal argument, it seems like if we want to protect, and again, they mentioned the Lemming test, right? About what is a violation of the church and state. It seems to be in the clear in that front. If we're just talking about churches, again, we're not talking about denying someone the access of education or something. It's just,
well, you got that lady down in, what was it, Kentucky?
Yeah.
The county clerk who refused to sign marriage certificates for the county. It's like, she was definitely violating the law.
For sure.
But what do you expect for bumfuck Kentucky? You know, I mean...
Well, she was in service of the government, right? So that's different.
Exactly.
So she
100%. She was in the wrong.
Yeah, and that's a more clear case when it comes to just churches who organize themselves for these kinds of things. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's much precedent to say that you can deny their status, particularly for that reason. Whether or not churches should be denied their taxing status, again, whole other conversation.